This video proudly brought to you by the fine people at Housemade Industrial.
What is going on? Welcome back to the OG Frenchie. Today we're working back at this guard. It is time to remove some of this material on the backside. It is driving me nuts. It's nice and square and blocky, and that ain't gonna work. So we're gonna have to remove some of the material on the back part of the guard and oval it out a little bit more. So you can see I've got the work rest kind of tilted in. That way I'm digging into the backside of the guard while leaving the face of it alone. I'm trying to do this because I want to shape this guard a little bit more, and I also am thinking about doing some other things to the guard, and I need to get it closer to its final shape before I can work on more stuff on this guard. So you can see I'm taking my time and just trying to get that oval shape on the back. This is what we started with. You can see it was pretty square, and we're slowly working it back to an oval. This takes quite a bit of time, and for me, this is something new. I'm not really used to shaping an object like this. This is really kind of the first of its kind, so I'm trying to cut and remove the material where I think it needs to be removed, and that way the handle part will match up better to this guard when it's all said and done. Now I could just glue the handle and the guard all up at once and shape the entire thing as one unit, and that would be a lot easier, but because I want to do some more work to this guard, I need it to get closer to the final shape before I glue it. I thought about doing some stone wash finish, acid etching it, or maybe trying to put some sort of a design into it, but I can't do that until the guard shape is closer to the final dimension. Anyway, once I work on that some more, I get this little spacer piece glued up to the handle, and then that way we kind of have that finger area a little bit larger. That's what we talked about last episode, was maybe doing that. I decided to go ahead and use both of those spacer pieces on this handle, and it worked out pretty good. I think it's going to look really good, and it's definitely going to give a little bit more space for the finger. So I glued it up off camera, but once I got it glued up there, I just kind of, cut away the other bit of material that we didn't need. And then I go ahead and stick the knife in, and I'm going to go ahead and drill the pin now while the handle is still in its block or square form. I feel like doing this now is going to be a lot easier than trying to drill through a handle that's already shaped. So I take my time with this step. I go ahead and drill out the wood and mark the back of the tang, and then drill the tang separately. This is pretty typical for what I do. I feel like this is the easiest way to do it. Once I get it accomplished, you can see that it actually looks pretty stinking good. We got the mosaic pin in there. Everything is lined up, and it's looking really good. I just now need to remove a little bit more of that material right there in the finger area. So I'm taking my time once again back at the small wheel to do that. This episode is a lot of work, and it's a lot of little fine detail work. I'm not really necessarily focusing on one thing. I'm just trying to fine-tune this whole thing a little bit at a time. Once I get that part done, I go ahead and use this little tiny baby belt sander. I bought this the last time I tried to do a metal guard, which was on the French Saber, and it came in handy. Now I'm just using it to help kind of hand sand, and I figured this would be a heck of a lot faster than doing it by hand. And I can't do the whole thing with this, but I can do some of it, so that's what I was doing there. And then once I kind of get it roughly hand sanded, I go ahead and throw on a Scotch-Brite belt and bring it over to the grinder and just kind of smooth out the surface finish. The Scotch-Brite belt is awesome. It really does a great job at kind of just smoothing everything out. Now I spend quite a bit of time doing things like this, hand sanding, using the little tiny belt sander, the Scotch-Brite. I even tried buffing. I'm just trying to smooth this thing out because it's getting close to its final shape. And you can see here that the Scotch-Brite belt really does work well. It's nice and ovaled, it's got a nice surface finish, and I think for the most part, we can call this good, at least for now. Now we have the whole unit back together, and I'm just kind of taking a look at it and seeing how it's progressing. It's looking good so far. Now I am getting a little antsy and I'm ready to do something else. So I decide to go back to working on the bevels. I'm really close to the final height of the bevels, at least the bottom one. So what I'm doing here is just scribing out the final line of where I want it to be. And I use some layout fluid to do that, and then just a set of calipers to mark the final line. And this is a really good way to do it, at least for me, because it gives you that visual representation of where to grind to, and then that way it's going to be even on both sides. Once I get both sides scribed, then we're ready to get back at the grinder. You can see here I've got the line scribed. There's maybe a 3/16 of an inch or so left to remove, and I just start one section at a time. You can see there I maybe removed a 1/16 of an inch. So it's really just kind of slow going. But I take my time and do a little bit at a time until I get it where I want it to be. So up until this point, we have made some decent progress on the guard, on the handle some, and now onto the bevels. In the last couple of clips, you just saw a time lapse and some other video of just working on the bevels. So this is a really good way to do it, in my opinion. Once you have the blade heat treated and you're ready to continue getting the bevels to their final height, using the layout fluid is really good. You can put the layout fluid down, then take your set of calipers, and in this case I just marked where I thought a good even amount was, and you can see that that's where we got that line. And then that way I can lock the calipers down and this line will be even on both sides. And that's a really good way just to make sure that the bevels are even. This particular blade, because we're getting ready to grind in a top bevel, instead of following this all the way up and out, I am hoping that we can get this next bevel and this one to line up towards the tip. So I'm not going to be bringing this one up as high, or the tip part up as high as I am the back. Now on this other side, this is the side we just got done grinding, and you can see I am slowly working my way up to this line. I thought it would be a good place to stop though and talk a little bit more about grinding bevels. And in particular, doing this method. This is intimidating to a new knife maker. It especially was for me when I first started. You know, there's a few good videos out there showing you kind of how to do it. But I think, you know, continuing to show and share my tips is going to help somebody somewhere, and I just think that that is awesome. Like, let's say here, and I've got just this extra little bit to get the bevels up. I have to come into the belt and push more down on the blade so that the belt and the contact wheel bite down into where I want it to bite. Now, unfortunately, because of the height of this blade and the diameter of my contact wheel, I really can't get a true perfect hollow grind. I just looked online for a 14-inch to see if that would get me closer. I did the math, and yes, it would get me a lot closer to being even, but it's $120 for the 14-inch wheel, and it's going to take a week to get here. So I just figure we're going to do it this way. Anyway, what I'm trying to show is, let's go to this side so you'll be able to see it a little better. When I approach the contact wheel and I begin to push in, I am going to be able to find where the bevel is pretty easy because I can kind of put my thumb on the back side of the bevel here and it's just going to sit. And that's because we already have a bevel. But what I want to be careful of is how I am holding the blade in this direction. So if I push in more towards the top, of course it's going to be grinding more away at the edge, which in some cases is necessary. Like earlier, this line was really close to the cutting edge. It's still really close, but I had to remove some of that material. So instead of holding back, I was pushing in a little bit more, trying to get rid of some of that material. And the best way to sneak up to a line is to find where your knife sits on the wheel and then simply take your thumb and find the bottom and just kind of ever so slightly tilt it back. And it's really easy to do it because once you find the groove, you just simply kind of pinch it back a little bit, and that makes it easy. You can also take a look at the top of the blade. Let's see if I can get a better shot here. This is the view that I'm looking at, right? So you can also pay attention to where your edge is at. If you come up into the belt, you just want to kind of slowly push it first until you find the bevel. And then you want to pay attention to where that cutting edge is. If it is in towards the belt, then you're going to be wrecking the cutting edge or tearing away from the cutting edge, removing material, so to speak. And if you want to take your line and hike it further up towards the spine, you're going to want to find the cutting edge and pull it out a little bit from the belt, if that makes sense. So hopefully this visual helps somebody out there. I really don't see a whole lot of videos on the internet explaining in great detail the little nuances of grinding. And that would have been super handy for me as a beginner. And I feel like, let's be real, not a whole lot of people watch my channel. And I feel like those of you that do are knife makers. And you may be at the same skill level as me, or you may be better, or you may be just starting out. But I know there's a good majority of people that watch me that are just starting out. And that's why I like to stop and have these little segments in the video to help people, because it really is invaluable to have, a video where you can learn, different things about knife making is just super cool. So thanks for being patient with that part. I know that I do it often. I kind of slow things down and get more in depth on things, but just know that it is helping some people out there. Another thing, while I've got you and we're talking, is I just noticed this nickel shim. It kind of fizzles out right here. It gets a little wonky. And then down here, it's like, I don't know what the heck it's doing, but it's kind of interesting and kind of cool. I wonder what this is going to look like. This was not here a second ago, but as I'm grinding away more material, it just kind of appeared. So anyway, it'll be interesting and something to keep an eye on. Just thought it was different. So anyway, let's get back to grinding this here knife. We're making good progress. I'm just going to stick with it and keep going, and we'll see about getting this other side pulled up. I have never done a double hollow grind, or really a grind that meets in the middle, two bevels that meet in the middle. I've done some daggers, and I guess that counts a little bit, but this is such a weird shape with different heights. The bevel starts out here and then gets a tad bit wider and then shrinks out to the end. Those of you who watch me know that I am not an expert, and for anybody watching this for the first time who does not know me, I never claim to be an expert. I am simply a hobby knife maker. I've been doing it for a couple years. I'm not super great, but this is really stuff that I like to stop and share my experience doing this, because you don't see a whole lot of videos about grinding bevels. Anyway, this top one, you can see I'm slowly kind of working this one down. It is behaving a little bit different than I thought it would. So instead of keeping the edge parallel the whole time, or trying to, I'm realizing that I actually have to kind of do it a little different because of the height of the bevel shrinks down. And I'm just taking my time doing this, but I'm also kind of digging this in a little bit. And then as I get into this weird part where it's almost a dip, kind of like it was over here, the same principle applies, where you kind of pull it out and then back in to the flat part. I'm having to do that, but I'm doing it at the very end on this part. So kind of starting out like this, leveling out, and then at the end, not only am I using the edge of the belt, but I'm also making sure that I don't continue to apply a lot of pressure and keep the knife tilted down too much. Because what that's going to do is it's going to get this bevel to grow further, and we really don't want it to get any further down the blade. My idea for this was that both of these bevels would meet right here at the point and slowly kind of fade back into close to the middle of the blade. But my point is that there's really no great way to try to do this. It's all just kind of feeling it out. And for those of you still on the journey of bevel grinding, that is what you have to do. You just have to practice and feel it out. So anyway, I'll grind a little bit more, and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about here. I'll start on this side here. We're going to start towards the end and find where the bevel is, since I've already got it started here. So I'll just flip this around and push it up against the belt, and I can tell that's where the bevel is. I can also push it this way, and then we'd be back on the bottom bevel. But we're going to start here, and then we're going to hold that angle as we pull it across. And then when I get towards the tip, I'm actually going to change the angle a little bit and have it tilted in a little bit more, because of the height of this bevel gets smaller. So anyway, that's probably confusing. It's still confusing to me trying to figure this out, but let me just do a little bit and I'll try to show you, I guess, what it looks like. See if I can move this out of my way a little bit more, because it's kind of hard to do it when it is right in your way. Maybe if we come up and point it down a little bit more, I can sneak my hand in here. Alright, there we go. So right in here, I can hear a different sound, and that is because you can see now we're digging back into the flat part of the steel. So that's a good indication that your bevel is, you're changing the course of the bevel is by the sound that it's making and also the feel of it. And so we're basically just going to keep going and trying to work this further down. And to do that, we're simply going to be applying a little bit more pressure this way so that this part actually makes contact with the belt instead of up here, if that makes sense. All right, so after finishing all 4 of these bevels, we have one killer looking knife. And that was definitely time consuming, but it was worth slowing down to do it right. I really am honestly proud of myself because this was not easy to do. This took a lot of time and a lot of patience to try and figure this out. Is it perfect? No, it is not. But, you know, for the most part, I think we accomplished everything that we wanted to. The main thing being the nickel shim. You can see that it is all the way removed back away from the cutting edge, not only on the top, but also along the bottom. So that was the main goal. And we got the core material exposed, which is going to be important for cutting, as nickel probably isn't going to be the best metal to hold a hard edge. So now we're just going to finish this dude off with a Trizac 120 grit equivalent. I think this is the A160, which is supposed to be the 120-ish equivalent. And I figured that will be a good belt to stop on before we start hand sanding. So let me go ahead and run this on that belt for a few passes, and then we'll be pretty much done with the bevels, which is awesome. You can see that Trizac belt just leaves a really nice finish. It's got really uniform scratches, and it will be a great place to transition from hard ceramic belts into hand sanding. So I'm just going to go ahead and run over the blade with the belt, and then we'll move on. Wow. This thing is looking killer. I mean, dadgum. And what is really cool about this is the amount of weight we were able to take off of this thing. It is light as a feather. I wish I would have weighed it prior to grinding it because it was a chunky boy. Now it is super, super lightweight and nimble. This thing is going to be awesome. Anyway, I really hope that you got some great information from this video, in particular grinding bevels. Obviously, I'm not a master. This isn't perfect. There are some flaws, and they are operator error. But like I said in the beginning of the video, I am not a knife-making expert. I am a beginner slash novice slash hobby style knife maker. I've only been doing it for so long, but doing a blade like this at this current state and time in my journey is really awesome because it's given me the confidence to know that yes, indeed, I can attempt and try to pull off harder things. And that is something that I have always preached on my channel. With anything, not just knife making, in life in general, if you are not pushing yourself and you are not testing your limits, trying something new, putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation, you are not growing. And that is what life is all about. It is about growing. It is about building your character, building your skills, and evolving. And doing stuff like this just helps to accomplish those things. If I don't push myself and try new things, then I'm just stuck in a stinking rut and I'm going to be the same old OG Frenchie that I was yesterday. And that is not what I want to be. One thing that you can do to help me out, if you haven't already, is hit that subscribe button. That would be really awesome. I would really appreciate it if you subscribe, liking the video, commenting, anything that gets you involved with the video is going to help propel my future videos to more knife makers. And that is what it's all about, is building and developing a community of friends and people that share the same hobby and interest so that we can just bounce ideas off of one another, inspire one another, and encourage one another to continue with this fun craft. Anyway, really appreciate you guys watching. Thanks again, and I look forward to catching you in the next episode where we will continue to work on this beautiful blade. Thanks for hanging out. Hope you guys have a fantastic week. Peace.